Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful week full of more work. So, I'm going to be working at my station over there where I do the scanning and things like that. So, we're going to transfer over to that. Hopefully, your work for this morning is going to be fruitful and good. So, switching over to that set now. Maybe more like this. That's better. All right. You should see me and hear me over here. Hopefully. If all is operating as it should. Oh, righty. See if I can pull this back a little bit more. Ooh, doesn't want to. Really doesn't want to do that. Okay. So we have a lot of things here that aren't really dealt with. This guy looks like I've used exactly one page. I can use more than one page later on. And yes. Brave for Peace, 1965. This is a previous version of So I am sorting paperwork right now by age. This is an old photo album from our family, so I'll keep the photo album, especially since some of the things in here are fascinating. This, interestingly enough, right here, it's a school day, my school day memories, right? And it is from my grandmother, from her elementary or high school. This is their equivalent to a yearbook, right? In a minute, I'm going to photograph that. But first, I'm trying to just get things organized here. So you guys may or may not, depending on whether you're new to this stream or not, but what is happening here is that I am dealing with the paperwork for my family, which has many of 10%. Military savings plan starts on September 1st. My family, most of my family members now have passed on, and so I am trying to deal with their I'm gonna read last. This is a note from one of Mom's friends. Not sure what we got that. I don't know if they keep any of these. They don't look particularly good, so they put them straight out. They will refuse to get thrown away. On to my child. It'll be scanned in and dealt with. So here is part of our problem. These are my dad's pay stubs from 1971. So I'm going to look through them and see if any of them are significant or outstanding in any way. But what I'll do is I will save the first and the last of these and anything that was weird in the middle. So number one on this was this guy. Right here. He's number one. And there's all of his middle ones here. There's 6, so we're in June, July. I think this is funny. This paycheck came out exactly 1 year before my birth. Correct. That's why I'll keep that one, just because it's interesting. August, September, October. This might be the last one. These are a little out of order back here. Let's see. I'll make sure that all these are 11:59. All right. Those all get thrown away. So I kept only the first, the last, and the most interesting of these, which is that middle one. All right. Oh man, guys, look at this. So this, I'm keeping this one just because of the awesomeness of it. But wait, what this is right here, these are old transfer numbers. So if you wanted to write something on a large piece of paper back in the day, you'd use these transfer numbers. You'd put them down on the paper, and you'd scratch the back here until the letter transfers to the paper underneath it. My dad had this one, which was the font Modern Gothic, which I think is cool because it's font number 666. I'm sure that was no one ended up paying to, at least my dad. So for the purposes of just coolness, I'm keeping that. Yeah. I like this. It's a big X grid. I'm gonna go scan that in. So it's gonna join my scan pictures things. Some school classrooms here. Probably be useful somewhere along the line. And then I'm going to look. all of these things. I love these because they were this is probably a scan-in thing too, which is why these are all different. I have to go somewhere. All right, this is family tree. That's also family tree. These are all family tree as well. So they will all be done at the same time. I don't need to keep these. I just need to take pictures of them. So we've been keeping the family tree data for a long time, and I don't need to, frankly. This was a wedding invitation to a buddy of mine. This was always a thing that's kind of somewhat terrifying. These are more Dad's letters, which we will start with because that's what's last on here. It's my dad's letters from the Army. So I will keep going with this same pattern so that these guys will all be together. And I chuckled at my dad for saving every pay stub, but then I saved all my pay stubs too, so it's that. And much for the same reason. It's an echocardiogram looking knee, no less. Always a plus. The question really is on these. We're getting to the bottom here. Look at that. Before I spin up anything here, I'm sorting everything out. Alright, down to these. This actually worked. Alright, we've cleaned up the area now where photographs get taken. Now what I'm going to do is I have a bunch of things that need to be taken pictures of. Many things over here are significant pieces of our history or something like that. I'm not sure what we're keeping. Okay. These are all fascinating. Hard to see right now because of the glare, but these are all permits for driving licenses for my great uncle to drive various vehicles. So these are effectively his driver's license from 1935, 36, 37, etc. Over here, I'm keeping certain numbers of certain cards, and I've been keeping cards for a while now, making sure I have cards for all these people who, no longer are with us or whatever. Each one of these cards speaks volumes about what was going on in that era. What we were doing, things like that. So I'm keeping a lot of these, if nothing else, just for the cool factor of knowing what somebody was doing at that time, right? So I should sort these. Family. Time. Always fascinating to me because going back over these things, these are all my dad's cards, right? And all I'm looking for here is just information. My mom had a set of business cards too, and I'm looking for those as well. So, sorting through that and that. Sort, set, events. You may wonder, why am I sorting this now? Why not sort it later after it's all taken pictures of? For the most part, that's my battle plan. I don't intend to continue doing this one for forever on this stack. But the more that I sort now, the less confusing it becomes later on. So now is better than later. If I can avoid it, obviously. So I'm just going through and kind of putting everything in a nice little outside. These are all like official documents and stuff. So right here. It's things like this one that really make me kind of humored. Hard to see because of this guy. Mom worked for just a little bit with NBC, but she worked with NBC, so it's kind of cool. All right. Before we start here, let's swap batteries. Yeah, I designed these cards. Right? George has decided that he can sit over there on the other side. That's fine. What I'm doing is taking a picture of each one of these and then saving. I'll save the business cards. Business cards are small, they don't take up a lot of space. This guy right here is a business card my dad had. I'm trying to figure out where to put it. It's hard to see, but it's made. It's made of leather. It's a business card made of leather. I think that's fascinating. I don't know. I'm not keeping it, but I did want to. So my mom and dad's cards, I'll keep. My cards, I'll keep. But the buddies of my dad, this is all part of the world that my dad lived in, which was fun. But the reality is, I don't want to keep these cards at all. These are getting tossed away, but I'm going to photograph them first. My dad put all kinds of information in the back of cards. My dad, just like me, went back to college at one point in time to learn acting, of all things. And it cracks me up to think back on that one, only because Dad wasn't a bad actor. He actually was pretty good at it. Here's one that's weird. It's a business card from my grandfather. My grandfather's business card. And it's hard for me to show it to you guys. But what's hard to see is the phone number. Look at that phone number. Right? Pleasant 64724. Man, it's hard to figure out how to do this. Go to the right direction. That's Pleasant 64724. Isn't that funny? You're like, why is that significant? That was the number of my grandfather and grandmother back in the days before we had even 7-digit dialing, much less 10. My artwork is actually really love Steampunk Uncle Sam as far as piece goes. And now I don't think this guy cares at all anymore, seeing as how he has passed on to the other world. But let me get this angled correctly. You can see this here. This is what we call Steampunk Uncle Sam. Right? Not unlike I loved this game show. All right. I tend to keep pay stubs, or not stubs, but stubs for movies and things like that. These are all stubs from plays that Mom took my sister and I to when we were young. Some of these, it's kind of cool. Here's me going and seeing Totoro dub in 2012. This is the child ticket. So this is the one that my kiddo went. And my kiddo didn't find anything wrong with Totoro. And I sat there and thought for sure Totoro would freak him out, but not the way that these things work. So it was all good. I think this actually belongs to my father. I think this is Mission Impossible. Not 100% sure, but it was from Tuesday at 5:30 of some year. What do you mean? I think this is one of the last times that our family went to a play. And this was my mom's affirmation after we lost, or after she could no longer live at the house that we wanted to live in, and she had to move out because she was renting, and the rent ultimately went as it does. The renter decided the market was awesome and he wanted to sell the house instead. So, and this was before this last really weird bump. So this is a while back. And my mom kept this picture of Quasar Parker for a very, very long time. And for a while, we thought we were directly related to Quasar Parker, and of course, have long since then rediscovered that no, we don't. We're not even remotely related. The most relation I have to the natives, apparently, are my buddies that I hang out with. That's the closest we get. Anything beyond that is pure conjecture. But my buddies are close to me. I love my buddies, so there's that. It's just fun. Dude. Grandfather's occupation license, which was issued to him in, let me get back here. It's hard to find where the sweet spot is for this, you know? But this was my grandfather's electrical license, number 1. It's hard to see it down there in the bottom corner. Number 1. And he was number 1 on that for the 1 year that he still was alive. This is my mom's business calling card so she could call people. This is my mom's license. One of the last licenses she ever had. I believe No, it expired in 1995, so this was not one of my mom's last licenses. But I'm glad to have it. My mom didn't have a whole lot of pictures she had taken of her. So unsure what this represents, other than I'm not sure whether this will work or not. But I found a piece of plexi, which might be good for this very job. So we're going to take a quick break while I clean this. Let's see if this helps us. I feel like this piece of plexi will be useful if we get to a point where I have to see through something or press something down. Like in the case of this piece right here, plexi is slightly plexi is slightly just a little bit of a matte finish to it. So where you guys are seeing a reflection, there isn't much. So we're going to see what happens when I put this on here and then lay down the plexi. Actually is not bad at all. Like you can't see the plexi, which is awesome because that just flattened that whole thing out and helped us immensely. Because I don't know what this is or why we're keeping it. All we needed was that. I might be able to do the same thing with this guy. Yeah, that makes it really neat and clear, doesn't it? This is going to be one of those, why didn't I do this before? Moments. Because now this is very sharp. Yeah, it's not seeing the plexi at all. That's kind of cool. That was kind of cool. Okay. Actually, maybe do this for this guy too. Of which I have a Bazooka Joe bubblegum wrapper right here. And one of my really entertaining but rare, super rare artifacts from the day. There's once a location called Coco's. And in an odd twist of fate, one of the receipts from it survived to this day. This is a place called Coco's, and it once was a diner that was on the corner of right, keep these go with them work here. We're not keeping any of the family history paperwork. It's just going to get photographed and turned away. I'm going to do that next because my sister has said, and she is okay with the idea, we just keep the papers photographed as they were. And we don't have to worry about keeping the actual papers themselves. We just photograph them in situ. So we'll photograph this guy, and this will have all of the information. Throw it away. We track all of our genealogy online now, and the only thing that we need to keep of this is a visual picture of it, just in case some piece of information didn't get captured. But the odds are extremely rare at this point in time that any of this information is not captured. So at this point, I mean, these are very straightforward. I can already say that looking at these charts, I'm like, I know my mom put in a ton of hours on these charts. Good morning, Ray. How are you this lovely morning? Except that it's probably evening for you. Good evening, Ray. How are you this evening? You know, I guess you're right. Good night, Ray. But see, there's a weird thing in English because if I say good night, it sounds like you're going to bed, and it sounds like a goodbye. You know what I mean? So we don't usually say good night, which is for no reason. It's just a convention. It's like we just sort of do that. Your day is just starting, huh? And this to be an irony. Do you work complicated shifts? For example, do you get up very, very early in the morning to work? Oh, today is a holiday. Do you normally work complicated shifts? Man, the music's sitting there doing wow. I don't know if it's distorting for you. Dearest Grace and Steve. Oh, yes, I understand that. Not yet, but it's only because we've got a lot of work to do before we get to that point where I can be free. So at the moment, we may have to move out of this house, and if we do, I have all these family pictures that I don't want to take with me. They're not family pictures, they're family history, I guess, because like this is a letter from one of my mom or from my grandmother's friend to my grandmother in 1940 something. So yeah, so it's a lot. So I don't need to keep the physical letter, but many members of my family may want to read it at some point. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a picture of it, and that way I don't have to worry. So this also makes me feel better. Like some of these are letters from my mother's friends to mom. And yep, these can outlive us. And that's always important. it speaks a lot to the history of people, right? I mean, none of this is really important to everybody, but some of it's important to some people. I mean, sometimes I think it's just going to be interesting when we get there, because like things like this is my kids' school thing from, it's just the school calendar from a few years ago, but it was on the fridge and it was important. And you know, it was, I don't know where we picked this either. So, anyway. There was a time when I was in school and my friends would write me letters when I went to see my dad. My dad lived in a different state, so over the summer vacation and over the winter vacation, I would go see my dad and be in a different state. And my friends would write me letters, and you know, they're silly letters, but they're letters. It's kind of cool. I still have them. Like, that's really funny. And I'm throwing it away, but I'm keeping it here, you know. Don't need to keep it otherwise, but keeping it here. And that's cool. Let's do something else. Put that there. So, I think often about things like what you just said about these things outliving us. And I feel like that's very true. There's a certain amount of it's important that these things outlive us. The kiddo doesn't really care about some of this now, but the kiddo is 13. I care about it, but when I was 13, I didn't care either. So I'm actually kind of okay with this. You know, I'll keep it for the kiddo, and when they grow up, my kid will be older, and maybe we'll say, "Oh, I'm glad you saved all of these things." You know? Maybe. Here's my ticket on Lufthansa, which was awesome. When I went to Germany and Paris and all that. not keeping it, but it is fun to have. All right. Now let's do this. What this is right here is fascinating. This is my grandmother's school book. So she kept this from when she was a child in the 1920s. This is very much the equivalent of a yearbook now. Wow. But my grandmother kept this February 3rd, 1930. So this book is not quite 100 years old. Yeah, I actually inherited my grandfather's tools this last time I was down there to visit. My darling sugar lump. This was middle school or elementary school for my grandmother. It had to be. I understand that one too. That's sad. It's always sad. It's interesting seeing what these children were saying to my grandmother. My grandmother passed away 15 years ago from old age. And here are all of these kids talking to their fellow kid, you know. This was when my grandmother was a child. You know. Think about that, and all these lovely sentiments that they all wrote on here. April 3rd, 1931. So we're moving on So this must have been all of her school. Yeah, because here's June 9th, 1933. In June of 1933. I like it says June space 1933. Like this person forgot what day it was. I don't know what day it is. Some things never change, right? Some things never change. March of 1934. It's just really fascinating to me. Yep, that's what I thought. Kids are kids all over the world. The writing on the back. Man, probably a good thing I didn't find this while she was still alive. Some of these nicknames are really cute and adorable, but not my grandmother anyway. Remember the robin, remember the dove, remember the day you and blank fell in love. It says, just marry me. That's so cute. Let me use this. Hold it down. And I will keep that. It's very, very cute. Something interesting about seeing the just the my grandmother's sort of world. It's just cute. It's kind of always fascinating. In this instance, it's really interesting to go through, my history and my family's history, and it humanizes them so much. These are children, especially what we just read. That was children. All of those children are gone. Maybe not all of them, but the odds are really good that all of those children are long since gone, long since left this planet. And it always fascinates me in that instance. It always does. So, and it's not a given because all of those kids would have been born in the 1920s. And so it's been 100 years since they were born. My grandmother was born in 1922, so the odds are pretty good. None of them are around anymore. So you're looking at sort of a time capsule, This is why I'm doing it this way. I just need to be able to read this data later on down the road. This is actually an old version of my comic book layout before this newest iteration. And I know that at some point, I will have to go back through some of these and figure out what I was writing at one point in time. But I don't need to keep the pieces of paper. You know what I mean? I don't need to keep that. I like how I was going to this is when I was in Honolulu. In Honolulu. You're in Honolulu, but on Hawaii. Yet another one of those weird affectations of English. Keeping one copy of Uncle Bud's morning. My grandfather died. Interesting, we were just talking about this because this is the memorial of my grandfather. When he was buried, they, of course, put him. We had a service, and this is the service that we went to, things like that. sad aspects of our family right here. This is Marshall and Louise, who are my great uncle, and his wife, and they were killed. Somebody robbed their house and killed them. And it doesn't happen often. I mean, I know that, like, when you look at our media, it seems like we're all getting killed all the time. And it actually doesn't. Of all of the members of my family, and I have quite a few of them that we're recording here, of all of those members of my family, not very many of them have been killed. Most of us have lived for many years, of course. The majority of us live to old age still, which is another one of those things that's always interesting to me when people pay a lot of attention to the media and they miss some of the larger pieces of things. Like, it's not that dangerous here, but boy, my kids, when I was teaching in Japan, they thought that we were shooting at each other all the time. That's just all we did. Just shot at each other all the time. And I was like, it's not how it happens here? Okay. The media, you watch TV, you see movies. In the movies, it sure does seem like we are always perpetually shooting at one another, you know? We're not, of course. Everything here is pretty normal. Very boring. Well, not boring, I guess. Here is a spiral notebook outlaying. Oh, hey. These are all ships that belong to my universe. All right. I've forgotten whether to picture that. I know one thing that's going to have to happen here. We're going to have to buy new batteries for this camera because we've been hot charging these batteries a lot. And hot charging means when you take one battery and you pull it out, and you put another battery in, and then you swap them a lot. And that ends this guy. He's done. I like using these guys. Saga. I do like the art of Saga. Not sure what that's about, but okay. And down on Bless Your Heart. Anytime we start with Bless Your Heart, that is Southern for I am so sorry. Whatever's happening to you. Like, you use that whenever it's like, I have a cold and I feel really sick. And they'll say, oh, bless your heart. Let me bring stuff to you. I'll bring you some food. You'll feel better. Oh, cracks me up. One of my characters, Pryla Winters, Pyria. I don't know. I keep randomly making their names up, so I use a random name generator to do it. So I think I have her already set up in another place, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this was for, I was going to use her as a permanent character, but then COVID hit and we no longer played games together. She's a D&D character. And this was her character jacket. And now these guys, this is one of my favorites. Always will be. I will keep. So I make, during the game now, what I do is I make standees. So when I'm playing, I can have a standee, have the character so these are what I call, these are Quasar standees. So when I play role-playing games, I put these on the table. That way, people can remember, because I don't often play male characters, I often play female characters. There we go. So like I said, hot swapping my battery. This is one of my favorite games that has ever existed, and they've never made a game as good as this game, in my opinion. This is a game called Halley Project. Halley Project was a game for the Apple II. So we're talking about the 80s era of PCs. And it was simple. You were on a spaceship, and your spaceship had different missions. And the first mission was to travel to Halley's Comet, because it was made in 1985, this game was. And Halley's Comet made a pass on Earth in 1986. So the idea was you were supposed to travel to Halley's Comet and then travel back. These are the rules for it. And I love this. I love that I still have this. I'm going to not keep the actual pages, but I will keep the rules that are as they're written in here, because these are really, really cool. This is the actual rules that and you printed them out. So this is not an artifact. I think I printed this out recently even. And by recently, in the last 10 years. But it's having the rules to Halley Project is always so amazing to me. Halley Project was my favorite so much. In my opinion, I don't think there's ever been a game as cool as this. And now I believe that my child could probably make this game in probably a week. It's literally child's play now to make these games. But the game was so fascinating because you would start your spaceship out on Earth. Then you would have to aim your spaceship toward another object in the solar system. And you had to use the constellations to find them. So you couldn't just you had to go look for, you saw on the map that Jupiter, let's say, was in the constellation of Cassiopeia. And then you would have to jump to Cassiopeia, or you turn the ship until the constellation Cassiopeia was in front of you. And then you hit the acceleration button. And then when you went into light speed, the screen would flicker, so you couldn't read the constellations anymore. So you had to see how far out the Jupiter was, let's say. And then you had to watch when you went to light speed, it counted up how much distance you had, accumulated. And so you had to jump and then come out of it at the exact right spot. And sometimes you were pretty close, sometimes you weren't. Sometimes you made a really big mistake. It became something that you very much regretted your life choices on. So it was a wonderful game. A very, very wonderful game. And I loved it because the whole point was not to shoot somebody or kill somebody or whatever was your point in this game was to get to another star or to get to another planet. And the bad guys were gravity. You know what I mean? Like, it was gravity and it was wasn't some, you didn't have the evil bad guys, which in 1986 was always Russia. It was always Russia. And that got so boring and so old and just miserable. All right. I think we have cleared. We still don't have a green light on the other battery. Man, like they call 52 times to remind you that you have a doctor's appointment. And though I appreciate it as someone who tends to forget that I have doctor's appointments, it's still kind of like, wow, guys, relax. They even left a voicemail message. I'm loath to start the next set on a battery that's almost dead, so we'll swap the batteries. Okay. Boy, I'm glad we gave you a place to lay down there, George. The cat has taken my chair. I'm sure that is not actually an uncommon thing for other people as well. I'm sure they also have a chair with a cat. But my cat has taken my chair. And that is a thing. So we're going to do this set now. It was mostly charged. Dang it. These were letters that my dad wrote when he was in the army. And he was stationed in Turkey. And what he did was pretty much keep an eye on the Soviet Union to see what the Soviets were doing. So all of his letters are pretty boring because he was top secret. All of the things he was doing was top secret, which was entertaining later on in life because I asked him about it. He's like, well, I am not allowed to talk about it. And then I was like, okay. And he said, well, but that's, silly because all of the equipment that I was using back then, your phone is much more advanced than anything I was using. So it is silly of us to keep these locks, but it is against the law for me to tell anybody. Apparently, what he was doing was watching the radar and things like that. It was just boring stuff, but he was part of the American-Soviet Cold War games that were being played during that time. These are very interesting to me. I'm also fascinated by how the world changes and shifts and moves. I mean, obviously, I spent an awful lot of time in Japan, a place where not long ago the Americans dropped a very large nuclear bomb on. The people there didn't seem to harbor ill will towards me. It seemed even more interesting that my grandfather, who did not in fact serve overseas during World War II, was more bothered than anybody I ever met there. Nobody there was as bothered. But I also think that it's interesting when you talk about propaganda, the way that we sort of teach people in our countries as to how they should react or feel. Me personally, I have come to the conclusion a long time ago that the people aren't necessarily a problem in a war. It is always the government that is the problem. The people tend to want to just go back to work and do their jobs. Nobody wants to get into a war. Even when we talk about the situation that's heading out, any situation that heads out today, even the conflicts in Ukraine and Afghanistan, all of those various locations, it's still pretty much the same problem. It's like nobody really wanted to get into that fight. The governments wanted to get into the fight. And especially since anybody who wants to get into a fight, as soon as the fighting starts, they realize that it is not glorious. It is very ugly. And they tend to want to get out of the fight at that point if they're committed. So you may end up with a certain number of people who are bloodthirsty and really interested in the idea of the fight, but they tend to decide it's not a good idea at some point. These are the things that really interest me. Why people do what they do. What part of our culture does that? You missed all kinds of stuff. Now I'm talking about my dad's letters. My dad was in Turkey during the Cold War. And these are all letters that he wrote home. And all of them are pretty mundane because what he was doing was top secret, of course. So he couldn't talk about it. And I'm humored by the fact that, all of his letters are pretty. I mean, we went shopping today and I did this thing and I did that. You know what I mean? It wasn't very complicated. It's pretty boring. This cracks me up. But I was kind of musing because I'm writing a comic which is very much a war story of some sort, and not in the traditional sense. It's obviously it's science fiction, and it's really a space opera, but it is still a war story. And it was kind of one of those things I was just kind of pondering. I was thinking about that. It's like, well, that's interesting. And I was just thinking about, in general, the concepts behind this. I was thinking just about, war, fighting. Nobody really likes war. Except the governments. The governments sure do like the war. But nobody else seems to like the war. There might be people who start out with, oh yeah, the war is awesome. And then they realize the war is just ugly. And then they're like, maybe we're not so into war. You end up with a certain number of people who always kind of want to do that. And I get it. But I think what's interesting is we don't usually hear stories about the people who are caught up in the war. We usually hear about the people who were the heroes or who fought and struggled in the war. People who succeeded. It makes it easy for people to think the next time around the fighting public full of heroes. Interesting things. What we really find sometimes definitely it's like bullying. I often believe that countries behave like big people, you know? And what I mean by that is it feels like, to me, often, it feels like the way that countries behave is like a child. And I'm not talking about like, or a person. Like, you end up with people who get their feelings hurt and, you know, and they strike out or they lash out or something because they're mad, angry because of things. And it's reacting like a human, you know, like a person. And how those people react, how that country reacts, depends a lot on the number of people in charge. So, like, because it's the sum of the people or the average of the people in charge. So, if you have one person, then if you insult that one person, then the whole country will go into, will become like that one person and will have to behave as that one person. That's why dictators are usually a problem. Because a dictator will get us into a war because they got their feelings hurt or something. And so it becomes an instant problem. But I'm going to read what you're saying, and I don't have my glasses on now, so. Yeah. Oh, and that's the thing. It's like in feudal times, you had pretty much the king, and that meant one person, which means that if you did something to that king's country or whatever, it became a problem because the king would become insulted and therefore would have to attack. So that would become sort of a thing. No, well, and that's why I'm fascinated by the concept of propaganda. Propaganda allows us to have a person, one person, have anger or upset or become, whatever. But that one person can then dictate how the country works, right? Because propaganda, it's the way that you continue to have these abilities, the ability for, let's just say, me as the president to attack another country because propaganda, I managed to get all of my people to vote for it. And I find that to be also very interesting. So, it's still, I have the one-to-one person theory going on here, right? Like, we are all, I feel like, just extensions of who we are as an individual. And that's why you get personality feels from countries like, oh, he's XYZ, he's from country A, therefore he will act like this, he will behave like this. And some of it is true. I mean, when you deal with people who are from certain countries, they do act a certain way. But I mean, it's interesting because, like, for example, Americans are known around the world to be really disrespectful to the the area that they come to. So, like, for example, they're known to be, bad with trash and maintaining things and trying to keep clean and things like that. They disrespect area. But of course, it's not true of all of us. I love leaving as little hint that I was there as possible. You know what I mean? Like I want it to be very, because I want to experience this place and not be part of the story. I don't want to be part of the story of this place. I want to know the story of this place. So I don't want to disrupt it. And so it's interesting because, of course, if you were to assume that I was a normal American, then you would assume I was going to make a mess of wherever you were. And it's not a non-earned thing. I mean, Americans do that. I mean, they go places and they are completely and totally unaware of the damage that they do, and they're rude and things like that. And I understand. I completely understand it. Makes total sense. I'm not blaming them. So, all right, moving back to the other side. So, see you in a second. Let me go ahead and close this one out. I need to close it before. Can hear me. You can't even hear me because the volume was turned down so that there wouldn't be an echo. Now I'm over here. You can hear me over here. Turn the volume back up on my speakers too. There we go. So now you can hear me. Now I'm talking. All right. I'm out of here. I'm heading out of here. I'm going to go walk around a lake, apparently, because that's what I'm going to, walk around a park anyway. Got to get the exercise in. Thanks for joining me, Ray. Thanks for being here and being part of my show this morning, keeping me company while I was digitizing all of those things. I will talk to you all later. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And remember, keep your eyes on the stars. Bye-bye.